Naomi Carter was 28 years old when the phone call arrived, but the moment that truly changed her life had happened 8 years earlier. On that afternoon, she sat quietly inside a crowded auditorium in Charlotte, North Carolina, surrounded by families celebrating graduation day. Her older sister, Danielle Carter, was the reason everyone had gathered. Danielle was the pride of the Carter family, top student, scholarship winner, and the daughter their parents constantly praised. Naomi sat 15 rows behind them, wearing a simple navy dress she bought from a discount store for $35. No one had asked about her outfit or even noticed she was there. That had always been Naomi's role in the Carter family. Danielle stood in bright lights while Naomi faded into the background. Even as a child, Naomi understood that her parents measured success by comparison, and somehow she never measured up. The Carter household looked perfect from the outside. Their father, Leonard Carter, owned a small accounting firm in town. Their mother, Patricia Carter, worked as a respected school administrator. Neighbors admired their tidy brick house and the neat flower garden Patricia maintained every spring. But inside the house, the atmosphere was different. Danielle was treated like a rising star whose future had already been decided. She collected awards, scholarships, and praise like trophies. Naomi, 2 years younger, worked quietly at part-time jobs and studied hard enough to stay above average. At dinner every night, the conversation revolved around Danielle's achievements. "Our girl is going to lead the world one day," Leonard often declared proudly. Then his eyes drifted toward Naomi for a brief moment. "You'll figure something out eventually," he would add casually. The words sounded harmless, yet Naomi always felt the silent message beneath them. By the time Naomi reached high school, she had started keeping a small notebook hidden under her mattress. Each time her parents compared her to Danielle, she wrote down the date. At first, she believed the comparisons might motivate her to improve. But as the number grew past 50, Naomi realized the truth. Her parents were not trying to inspire her. They were reminding her that she would always come second. Danielle's acceptance into Greenridge University came with a scholarship worth nearly $30,000. The family celebrated with an expensive dinner at a downtown restaurant. A few months later, Naomi also received an acceptance letter to the same university, but with no scholarship attached. Her parents simply nodded politely before returning to their evening routine. Naomi financed her own education with loans and campus jobs. The difference between the two daughters' opportunities was obvious, yet no one in the house acknowledged it. Graduation day for Danielle arrived bright and warm in late May. Families filled the university arena with cameras, flowers, and excited chatter. Naomi sat quietly in the back section while her parents occupied seats near the front. She watched them laugh proudly with other parents as they waited for the ceremony to begin. When the announcer suddenly invited several families on stage to speak about their graduating children, Naomi felt a brief flicker of hope. Maybe her parents would say something kind about both daughters for once. Leonard Carter stepped confidently to the microphone with Patricia beside him. "Our daughter Danielle has always been exceptional," he said proudly as applause echoed through the hall. Then he chuckled and added, "Honestly, if we had stopped with her, our parenting record would have been flawless." The audience laughed loudly. Patricia leaned toward the microphone and joked, "Well, at least one child turned out remarkable." The laughter rolled through the auditorium like thunder. Naomi sat frozen in her seat while hundreds of strangers found the joke amusing. On stage, Danielle covered her mouth while laughing along with the crowd. Naomi's fingers tightened around the plastic armrest beside her. Her chest felt heavy and her ears rang with humiliation. She had always known her parents favored Danielle, but hearing those words through a microphone felt different. It felt permanent. When the ceremony finally ended, families rushed toward the stage for photographs and hugs. Naomi remained seated while the arena slowly emptied around her. She stared at the stage where her parents had delivered the joke that shattered something inside her. After several minutes, she stood and quietly walked toward the exit doors. She almost reached the parking lot before she heard hurried footsteps behind her and her mother calling out her name. "Naomi, hold on," Patricia called as she hurried across the pavement. Leonard and Danielle followed a few steps behind her. Naomi turned slowly, her expression calm but distant. "You embarrassed me," Naomi said softly. Leonard frowned in confusion. "Embarrassed you?" "It was just a joke," he replied with a short laugh. Danielle shrugged casually. "Dad makes jokes like that all the time," she said. Don't take it so seriously. Naomi stared at them, disbelief rising in her chest. You told an entire auditorium that I shouldn't exist, she said. Patricia sighed impatiently. Naomi, please stop being dramatic. Today is Danielle's special day. Let's not ruin it. Something inside Naomi broke at that moment. She realized they truly believed the humiliation was harmless. I'm not coming to lunch, Naomi said quietly. Leonard glanced at his watch and shrugged. That's your choice, he replied before turning away. That evening Naomi returned to her dorm room and stared at her phone for nearly an hour. Then she began blocking numbers one by one. First her mother, then her father, and finally Danielle. Each contact disappeared from her phone like a door closing forever. Only one cousin remained unblocked, someone who had quietly texted to say she was sorry about what happened. Naomi cried until midnight, then wiped her face and opened her laptop. If her family believed she was worthless, she decided she would build a life that proved them wrong. That summer she worked 3 exhausting jobs. She served coffee in a cafe during mornings, assisted at the campus library during afternoons, and tutored students online at night. Some weeks she worked nearly 70 hours. The exhaustion was overwhelming, yet every paycheck she saved reminded her that independence was slowly becoming possible. Over the next several years, Naomi rebuilt her life step by step. She became a resident assistant at the university to reduce housing costs and secured a research assistant position in a biology laboratory. Her grades improved each semester as she pushed herself harder than ever before. When graduation day finally arrived for Naomi, the ceremony was completely different from her sister's. Because of global health restrictions that year, the event happened virtually online. Naomi watched the ceremony alone in her small apartment with her laptop balanced on a kitchen chair. When the announcer read her name, Naomi Carter, Bachelor of Science in Biology, a pre-recorded applause sound played through the speakers. Naomi smiled quietly and clapped for herself. It was not the celebration she had once imagined, but she still felt proud. She had completed everything without help, without praise, and without anyone from her family even knowing. Life slowly improved after graduation. Naomi secured a research position at a large medical center in Chicago and rented a modest apartment near the hospital. Over time, she built friendships with coworkers who treated her with kindness and respect. Therapy sessions helped her understand the emotional scars left by her childhood. Years passed without any contact from the Carter family. Sometimes Naomi wondered if they even noticed she had disappeared from their lives. By her late 20s, she had built something stable, steady income, close friends, and a sense of independence she had never known before. The painful memories of the past still appeared occasionally, usually during holidays, but they no longer controlled her thoughts. Naomi believed she had finally moved beyond the shadow of her family and created a future entirely on her own terms. One quiet evening in early winter, Naomi stood in her kitchen preparing tea when her phone suddenly rang. The number displayed on the screen was unfamiliar. She almost ignored it, assuming it was a telemarketing call, but curiosity made her answer. "Hello," she said cautiously. Silence filled the line for several seconds before a trembling voice finally spoke. "Naomi, it's your mother." Naomi froze, gripping the phone tightly. She had not heard that voice in nearly 8 years. "How did you get this number?" Naomi asked coldly. Patricia's voice sounded shaky and desperate. "Please don't hang up. It's about Danielle." Naomi felt her heart pounding as old memories resurfaced. "What happened?" she asked slowly. Her mother inhaled deeply before answering. "Your sister is in serious trouble, and we don't know how to help her anymore." Naomi stood in her quiet kitchen long after the call ended, staring at the dark screen of her phone. The words her mother had spoken echoed in her mind like distant thunder. Danielle was in serious trouble. 8 years had passed without a single conversation between them, yet suddenly Naomi was expected to return as if nothing had happened. Part of her wanted to ignore the call completely. She had spent years rebuilding her life after the humiliation of that graduation day. Another part of her felt something different, curiosity mixed with an old sense of responsibility she thought she had buried. The next morning Naomi called her therapist and scheduled an emergency session. "You don't owe them anything," the therapist said gently. Naomi nodded but remained silent. Finally she replied, "Maybe I don't owe them, but I need to know if I owe my sister something." 2 days later Naomi drove toward the neighborhood she had avoided for nearly a decade. The familiar streets of Raleigh felt strange now, like walking through memories that no longer belonged to her. The Carter house stood exactly as she remembered, white siding, trimmed hedges, and the same red mailbox at the curb. Naomi sat in her car for several minutes before stepping out. The front door opened before she could knock. Patricia Carter stood there looking older and thinner than Naomi remembered. "Thank goodness you came," her mother whispered with visible relief. Naomi kept her distance. "Where is Danielle?" she asked calmly. Patricia hesitated before answering. "Upstairs, in her room." Leonard Carter appeared behind his wife, arms folded. "She doesn't know you're here," he said. Naomi walked inside slowly, noticing that every framed photo on the living room wall still featured Danielle. Before going upstairs, Naomi stopped in the living room and faced her parents. "Tell me exactly what's happening," she said firmly. Patricia exchanged a nervous glance with Leonard before beginning. Danielle had started working at a prestigious consulting firm after graduation. The job demanded long hours, sometimes 80 hours a week. At first she handled the pressure well, but everything changed after a car accident 3 years earlier. Danielle injured her back and was prescribed strong pain medication during recovery. The medication helped at first, but Danielle struggled when the prescriptions ended. She began visiting multiple doctors seeking more pills. When her parents finally discovered the pattern, it was already serious. "She lost her job 6 months ago," Patricia admitted quietly. "She barely leaves her room now." Naomi listened without speaking, her mind processing every detail. "So she's addicted to the medication," Naomi said calmly. Leonard immediately shook his head. "She's just dealing with pain." Naomi climbed the stairs slowly after the conversation. The hallway looked exactly as it had when she lived there years earlier. Family photographs covered the walls, most of them showing Danielle at various milestones, school awards, tennis championships, graduation ceremonies. Naomi noticed again that none of the photos included her. At the end of the hallway she stopped in front of Danielle's bedroom door and knocked gently. "Go away," a weak voice called from inside. Naomi hesitated before replying. "Danielle, it's Naomi." Silence filled the hallway for nearly half a minute. Then she heard footsteps approaching the door. The lock clicked and the door opened slightly. Danielle's face appeared through the narrow gap. Naomi barely recognized her sister. Her hair was messy, her skin pale, and dark circles surrounded her tired eyes. Danielle stared in disbelief. "Naomi," she whispered, "why are you here?" The door opened wider and Naomi stepped inside the dim bedroom. Curtains blocked most of the daylight and the room smelled stale. Empty food containers and pill bottles covered the bedside table. Danielle sat on the edge of the bed, her shoulders hunched forward as if carrying an invisible weight. For several moments neither sister spoke. Finally Danielle laughed weakly. "They called you, didn't they?" Naomi nodded. "Yes." Danielle rubbed her face with trembling hands. "I didn't want you to see me like this." Naomi studied her carefully. The confident woman who once stood proudly on a graduation stage looked completely different now. "What happened?" Naomi asked quietly. Danielle hesitated before answering. "I got tired of trying to be perfect all the time." Tears filled her eyes as she continued. "Those pills made everything quiet for a while." Danielle's voice shook as she explained what the past few years had been like. After the accident, the pain medication had given her relief not only from physical pain but from constant pressure to succeed. When the prescriptions stopped, the silence disappeared. Anxiety returned stronger than before. Danielle admitted she began searching for new prescriptions and eventually bought pills illegally when doctors refused to refill them. "I kept telling myself it was temporary," she said softly. "Just until I felt normal again." Naomi listened quietly, absorbing every word. Danielle suddenly reached for her phone and opened her email account. "I actually tried to contact you 2 years ago," she said. Naomi frowned. "I never received anything." Danielle turned the phone toward her. On the screen was a saved draft message addressed to Naomi. "I wrote this the night everything started falling apart," Danielle explained quietly. Naomi read the message slowly. In the email, Danielle had written that she felt lost and didn't trust their parents to understand. She had asked Naomi for help, admitting she was scared of becoming someone she didn't recognize anymore. Naomi checked the address listed at the top of the email. Something immediately seemed wrong. The address contained a small spelling difference from Naomi's real email account. "Where did you get this contact?" Naomi asked. Danielle frowned in confusion. "It's been saved in my phone since high school." Naomi scrolled through the phone settings and discovered the contact information had been edited about 2 years earlier. Both sisters looked at each other in stunned silence. "Someone changed it," Naomi whispered. Danielle's face slowly turned pale as realization settled in. "Mom and Dad set up my new phone that year," she said quietly. Naomi walked downstairs holding Danielle's phone in her hand. Her parents looked up nervously as she entered the living room. "When did you change Danielle's contact information for me?" Naomi asked firmly. Leonard frowned immediately. "What are you talking about?" Naomi placed the phone on the coffee table with the email visible. "She tried to contact me when she needed help, but the email address was wrong." Patricia's expression shifted uncomfortably. "We might have updated her contacts when she got a new phone," she admitted quietly. Naomi felt anger rising in her chest. "You changed it deliberately," she said. Leonard crossed his arms defensively. "We didn't think involving you would help anything." Danielle had followed Naomi downstairs and now stood silently near the doorway. "You didn't want her to help," Danielle said softly. "You just wanted to control everything." The room filled with heavy silence. Naomi finally spoke again, her voice calm but firm. "Danielle needs professional treatment immediately," she said. "A real rehabilitation program." Patricia nodded nervously. "We'll do whatever it takes." Naomi shook her head. "You will pay for it, but you will not control it." Leonard looked offended. "She's our daughter." Naomi met his gaze without hesitation. "And the pressure you put on her helped create this situation." Danielle slowly stepped forward and spoke quietly. "Naomi's right." Her parents looked shocked, but Danielle continued. "I need help, not expectations." Naomi turned toward her sister. "If you're willing to enter treatment, I'll help you find the right place." Danielle nodded through tears. "I'm ready," she whispered. Naomi picked up her car keys from the table. "Then tomorrow we start figuring out how to fix this." 3 days later, Naomi drove Danielle across the state to a rehabilitation center located in the quiet mountains. The facility specialized in treating prescription drug addiction and offered a structured 90-day recovery program. Danielle looked nervous as they stepped out of the car. "Do you hate me for what happened back then?" she asked quietly. Naomi considered the question carefully before answering. "For a long time, yes," she admitted. "But now I see something different." Danielle waited anxiously. Naomi finally said, "We were both trapped in the same house in different ways." Danielle wiped her eyes and nodded slowly. When the intake counselor arrived to guide Danielle inside, Naomi gave her sister a brief but sincere hug. It was the first time they had embraced in nearly 8 years. As the doors closed behind Danielle, Naomi realized something unexpected. Helping her sister didn't reopen old wounds. Instead, it proved she had finally healed. After Danielle entered the rehabilitation center, Naomi returned to her apartment in Chicago feeling emotionally drained. The quiet apartment suddenly felt heavier than usual. For the first time in years, memories of her childhood home returned vividly. Naomi had promised herself she would never be pulled back into the chaos of that family again. Yet somehow she had stepped back into it willingly. Over the next several weeks, Naomi received short updates from the treatment center. Danielle was attending therapy sessions, group counseling, and medical evaluations. The first month was the hardest. Withdrawal symptoms made Danielle restless and irritable. Some days she wanted to leave the program entirely. But Naomi continued encouraging her through weekly video calls. Slowly Danielle's voice began to sound stronger. For the first time in years she spoke without fear or pressure. The woman Naomi saw on those calls was different from the sister she once knew. Meanwhile, Naomi's parents attempted to contact her several times. Patricia sent polite text messages asking about Danielle's progress, while Leonard tried calling repeatedly. Naomi kept her boundaries firm. She responded only with brief updates about treatment and refused any personal conversations. For years they had ignored her existence, and now she refused to allow guilt or manipulation to reopen old wounds. Danielle's therapists also encouraged distance from family conflict during recovery. Their focus remained on healing rather than blame. Naomi respected that advice. Instead of arguing with her parents, she focused entirely on Danielle's progress. Each week Danielle shared something new she was learning about herself. She talked about pressure, expectations, and the exhausting need to appear perfect. Naomi listened quietly during those calls, realizing how differently each sister had experienced the same childhood. One afternoon during a scheduled therapy session, Danielle spoke openly about the burden of being labeled the perfect child. She explained how every achievement had slowly become another expectation to maintain. "If I got one B in school, it felt like the world was ending," Danielle admitted during the session. Naomi watched through the video call as her sister struggled to explain years of pressure. For the first time Naomi understood something she had never considered before. Danielle had not been stronger than her. She had simply been trapped inside a different kind of cage. While Naomi had felt invisible, Danielle had felt constantly observed. Both sisters had grown up believing their worth depended entirely on performance. The therapist quietly summarized their realization: two daughters raised under the same roof, yet both learned they were loved conditionally. The words hung in the air long after the session ended. By the second month of treatment, Danielle's physical health began improving. She gained weight, her skin looked healthier, and her energy slowly returned. Naomi noticed the difference immediately during their weekly calls. Danielle also began writing letters, not emails, to process her thoughts. One evening Naomi received a handwritten envelope in the mail. Inside was a letter from Danielle apologizing again for laughing at their parents' cruel joke years earlier. "I should have defended you," Danielle wrote honestly. "I was afraid to disappoint them." Naomi read the letter twice before placing it carefully inside a drawer. Forgiveness was complicated, but the apology felt sincere. Naomi replied with a short message: "Focus on getting better. The rest will take time." Danielle responded with a simple heart symbol drawn in pen at the bottom of her next letter. During the final month of treatment, the Rehabilitation Center introduced planning sessions for life after recovery. Danielle met with counselors to discuss work, housing, and long-term therapy support. Naomi joined several of those planning meetings remotely. Together they discussed practical options for Danielle's future. Returning to the intense consulting career that once defined her life was no longer realistic. Instead, Danielle expressed interest in studying psychology and addiction counseling. She wanted to understand the experience she had gone through and help others facing similar struggles. Naomi encouraged the idea cautiously but positively. "Helping others might help you heal too," she told her sister during one session. Danielle smiled with quiet determination. For the first time in years, she was thinking about a future that belonged to her rather than one designed by their parents. 3 months after entering the program, Danielle completed the rehabilitation treatment successfully. Naomi drove back to the mountain facility to bring her home. When Danielle walked out of the building that morning, Naomi immediately noticed how different she looked. Her posture was straighter, her eyes brighter, and her voice steady. Danielle hugged Naomi tightly without hesitation. "Thank you for not giving up on me," she said quietly. Naomi shook her head. "You did the hard work," she replied honestly. Danielle moved into a supervised recovery house recommended by the treatment center. The house provided structure, counseling, and accountability for people rebuilding their lives after addiction. Naomi visited occasionally, but she allowed Danielle space to continue her recovery independently. Their relationship was still cautious, but it was slowly becoming something real. Several weeks later, Danielle agreed to meet their parents for the first time since entering treatment. The meeting took place in a therapist's office rather than at home. Naomi chose not to attend. She believed Danielle needed to navigate that conversation herself. According to Danielle later, the meeting was emotional and complicated. Patricia cried repeatedly while apologizing for past mistakes. Leonard struggled to admit fault but eventually acknowledged that their expectations had placed enormous pressure on both daughters. Danielle listened calmly but set firm boundaries with them. She explained that rebuilding trust would take time and that recovery required honesty, patience, and personal responsibility from everyone involved. When Danielle later described the meeting to Naomi, she sounded calm and confident. "For the first time," Danielle said thoughtfully, "I wasn't trying to impress them." As the months passed, Naomi returned to focusing on her own life in Chicago. She continued her research career at the medical center and maintained regular therapy sessions. Helping Danielle had not undone her progress. Instead, it had strengthened her sense of independence. She had proven to herself that returning to the past did not mean becoming trapped in it again. Danielle also continued building her new life. She enrolled part-time in community college courses related to psychology and addiction studies while working at a small bookstore nearby. The job was quiet and low pressure, exactly what she needed while adjusting to sobriety. Naomi visited once every few weeks, and the sisters often shared long conversations over coffee. Their relationship no longer felt defined by childhood roles or competition. Their parents occasionally sent letters or holiday cards to Naomi, but she chose not to reopen direct communication. The distance protected the peace she had worked years to build. Danielle respected that boundary completely. "You helped me when you didn't have to," Danielle once told her during a visit. "You don't owe anyone anything else." Naomi appreciated that understanding. Forgiveness, she had learned, was not always the same as reconciliation. Sometimes healing simply meant refusing to return to environments that once caused harm. Naomi had built a life that belonged entirely to her. She no longer needed validation from people who had once dismissed her worth. Nearly a year after Danielle entered treatment, the two sisters met again at a small cafe near the lakefront. Danielle smiled as she shared exciting news. She had completed her first year of recovery and planned to continue studying counseling. Naomi listened proudly. For years she had believed that returning to her family would only reopen old wounds. Instead, she had discovered something unexpected. Helping her sister had not weakened her strength, it had confirmed it. As they walked along the lake afterward, Danielle stopped and looked at Naomi seriously. "You know," she said softly, "they were wrong about you." Naomi smiled calmly and replied, "I know." For the first time in her life, those words felt completely true. Naomi Carter had spent years proving she was not worthless. Now she no longer needed to prove anything at all. Thank you for watching. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe to this channel for more interesting stories.